The sky of Lithera glowed with colors that no human had ever seen before. Clouds shimmered in shades of violet and gold, and the floating continents drifted slowly above a sea of sparkling mist. Birds with translucent wings soared between islands, their songs echoing across the air. On one of the highest floating lands, the palace of Princess Elara rose like a crystal spire, reflecting the colors of the sky. Elara stood on her balcony, her hands resting lightly on the railing. Her eyes scanned the horizon, taking in the beauty of her world. To her, Lithera was perfect, and she had always felt that she needed no help from anyone, especially not humans. Humans were often praised by other alien species for their adaptability and courage, but to Elara, they seemed weak and unrefined. She had met many of them before, and none had impressed her. That was why she had refused the human ambassador's offer to send a guardian to protect her. She did not need someone to watch over her. She was capable, strong, clever. Suddenly, alarms blared throughout the palace. Elara turned sharply, her senses alert. Outside, in the skies around Lithera, sleek black ships streaked like meteors toward her floating continent. Her palace was under attack. Elara's first instinct was to retreat to the inner sanctum, a place that even the most advanced attackers could not penetrate easily. But as she moved, she realized that the assault was faster and more coordinated than she had expected. The invaders were not ordinary raiders. They were part of a well-trained coalition that had targeted her planet with precision. Her mind raced. Every scenario she had prepared for seemed insufficient. Her personal guard, though skilled, was overwhelmed almost immediately. The air filled with the hum of energy weapons and the crackle of force shields. Elara clenched her jaw. Pride had always been her shield, but now she saw its limits. She had refused human help, confident that her own people and technology could protect her. And now she faced a situation that required more than just confidence. She ran to the hangar where her small shuttle waited. Its engines glimmered softly in the dim light, ready for immediate departure. She jumped into the cockpit and initiated the launch sequence. The shuttle lifted off with a smooth surge, leaving the palace under siege behind her. As she guided the shuttle into the floating forest zones, she realized that one of the energy blasts had struck her fuel containment system. Smoke curled from the rear of the craft and the shuttle began to lose altitude. Elara tried every maneuver she knew to stabilize it, but the technology she relied on so heavily began to fail. For the first time in her life, fear crept into her mind. She was alone in hostile skies with nothing to rely on but herself. She cursed her pride, silently wishing she had accepted the human guardian. But it was too late. She had no choice but to survive on her own. Hours passed as she drifted through the floating forests, avoiding jagged crystal formations and aggressive wildlife. Her shuttle finally touched down on a narrow ledge covered with luminescent moss. The engines died with a final shudder, and the cabin fell silent except for the soft hum of the remaining energy systems. Elara opened the hatch and stepped onto the mossy ground. The air was thick with the scent of alien flowers, sweet and sharp at the same time. She took a deep breath, trying to calm her racing heart. She had survived this far, but she knew the hardest part was ahead, finding safety in a world where she could not rely solely on technology. She activated her communicator, hoping to contact her palace. The screen flickered, showing only static. The interference was too strong. The enemy ships must have jammed all signals. Elara frowned. Alone, she was vulnerable, and then she heard a sound that made her freeze. It was not the roar of wildlife or the hum of her damaged shuttle. It was something different, footsteps. Strong, steady, human-like. She drew her energy dagger instinctively, her body tense and ready. From the mist emerged a man, tall and lean, dressed in a dark uniform that seemed both simple and advanced. His movements were confident, precise, and calm. "Princess Elara," he said. His voice was steady, almost gentle. "I was sent to find you." Elara's eyes narrowed. "A human?" she whispered. She had refused human protection. She had sworn she did not need anyone like him. And yet here he was. "I am Captain Jace Harrow," he continued, keeping his hands visible. "I can help you survive, but we need to move quickly. The enemy won't stop searching." Her pride flared, but she had no choice. She lowered her dagger slightly. "I can manage on my own," she said, her tone sharp. Jace shook his head gently. "Not this time, trust me. You need a guide, and I have the skills to get you out of danger." Elara hesitated. She studied him carefully. His uniform was simple yet functional. His eyes were clear, determined, and calm. Somehow, despite her prejudice against humans, she felt a flicker of hope. Perhaps this human was different. Perhaps humans were capable of more than she had believed. She nodded once, slowly. Very well. But understand this, I am the princess. I do not follow blindly. Jace gave a small smile. I wouldn't expect you to. They began to move through the misty forest, navigating the treacherous terrain. Elara used her knowledge of Lithera to avoid dangerous plants and unstable surfaces, while Jace demonstrated his own skills in tracking and survival. He seemed to notice threats that she overlooked, and his human intuition guided them around natural hazards and enemy patrols. Hours passed, and they found temporary shelter in a hidden cave illuminated by glowing crystals. Elara examined Jace, realizing she had underestimated him. He was not strong in the alien sense, nor did he possess her advanced technology, yet he survived. He adapted. He observed. He planned. For the first time, she felt a strange mix of emotions. Relief, respect, and curiosity. Could it be that humans were more than she thought? That night, they sat by a small luminescent pond inside the cave. Elara remained silent, lost in thought. Jace, ever calm, was cleaning a small device he had used to scan for enemy movement. You know, he said casually, I never thought I'd be helping an alien princess survive in her own world. But here we are. Elara raised an eyebrow. You do not seem impressed, she said. I've learned not to underestimate anyone, he replied simply, and especially not those who survive where others fail. Her pride softened slightly. She did not admit it, but she realized that his human adaptability, courage, and problem-solving were qualities she could respect. And perhaps she could even learn from them. As the alien night deepened, Elara looked out at the glowing mist outside the cave. She thought of her palace under siege and of her people who relied on her. She thought of her own limitations, and of the human who had unexpectedly proven his worth. For the first time, she accepted a truth she had never admitted. Sometimes, survival required more than pride and intelligence. Sometimes it required trust in others, even humans. She turned back to Jace, who was still quietly working on his device. Very well, Captain, she said softly. Lead the way. But know this, I am not an easy person to guide. Jace looked up, his eyes meeting hers. I wouldn't want it any other way. And so, the journey began. Elara, the proud alien princess, had refused human protection. Yet she now depended on him. In a world of floating continents, deadly enemies, and unpredictable danger, the unlikeliest of alliances had formed. One that could change not just the fate of a princess, but perhaps the future of two worlds. The floating forest of Lithera was beautiful but deadly. Massive trees with glowing leaves towered over cliffs, their roots hanging down like ropes into the mist below. Strange creatures scuttled across mossy rocks, some with sharp claws and others with glowing eyes that pierced the darkness. Elara moved carefully, her senses alert for every sound. She had survived many challenges before, but now, with Jace beside her, she realized she needed more than her intelligence. She needed strategy, adaptability, and courage. Jace led the way, stepping lightly on narrow paths that even Elara had not noticed. He carried a small device in his hand, scanning for movement and danger. Despite his simple human appearance, there was a precision to his actions that impressed her. Every step he took seemed calculated, every decision quick but sure. She had to admit grudgingly that humans were not as weak as she had thought. Stay close, Jace said, his voice calm and steady. Some of these creatures are territorial. They won't hesitate to attack if they sense you as prey. Elara nodded, her dagger in hand. I know, she replied. I can handle myself. Jace didn't respond, but she noticed a faint smile on his face. He had heard that line before. Most creatures underestimated humans, but he knew the value of observation and intelligence over brute strength. The path ahead narrowed, suspended between two floating cliffs. The bridge was made of vines and crystal strands swaying slightly in the wind. Elara tested it carefully, 1 foot at a time. One wrong move could send her plunging into the mist below. Step where I step, Jace instructed. Don't rush. Keep your weight centered and trust the material. It can hold more than it looks like. She hesitated but followed his advice. As she moved, she realized that Jace's human instincts were remarkable. He judged distances perfectly, avoided weak spots, and found the safest route without hesitation. His presence made her feel safer, though she would never admit it aloud. Halfway across, a low growl echoed from the forest below. Alara froze. From the mist emerged a creature she had never seen before. Its body was long and serpentine, covered in thick scales that shimmered in the light. Its eyes glowed a fiery orange, and it hissed as it slithered toward them. Alara raised her dagger, ready to strike, but Jace held up a hand. "Wait," he said calmly. "Watch its movements. Don't react too soon." The creature lunged, but Jace had already prepared a small energy net thrown with precise aim. It wrapped around the beast, restraining it without harming it. Alara stared in astonishment. The human had acted faster than she could, not relying on strength alone but on tools and intelligence. "You see?" Jace said. "Humans survive by thinking, not just fighting." Alara said nothing, but inside she felt a strange respect for him. Perhaps she had underestimated humans too quickly. As they continued, the forest grew thicker. Mist swirled around them, hiding hidden cliffs and dangerous routes. Jace moved cautiously, scanning constantly while Alara relied on her senses and knowledge of Lithera. Together they navigated the terrain, each complementing the other. Hours passed and they finally found a small clearing near a stream. The water shimmered with the reflection of glowing plants. Alara crouched by the stream, drinking carefully while Jace set up a small device to monitor their surroundings. "You need to rest," he said. "Even the strongest need energy to survive." "I don't need much," Alara replied, though her voice was quieter than before. "You underestimate yourself," Jace said gently. "A tired mind makes mistakes. Mistakes can get you killed." She studied him silently. His words were simple, but she knew they were true. She had relied on her intelligence and technology for so long. She had forgotten that survival required patience, caution, and endurance. That night, they built a small shelter using fallen branches and glowing leaves. The forest noises were loud, creatures calling to one another, distant roars echoing through the cliffs, but the shelter was safe. For now. Alara sat cross-legged, sharpening her dagger. While Jace examined maps and sensors, she noticed the precision in his actions, the careful calculations he made, and the way he always thought 2 steps ahead. "You humans are strange," she said finally. "You seem weak, yet you survive where stronger beings fail. How?" Jace looked up, his eyes reflecting the glow of the forest. "We adapt. We learn from everything around us. We can't rely on one advantage. We survive because we keep moving, thinking, and trying again. Strength alone doesn't last." Alara was silent, contemplating his words. It was true. She had always relied on technology and knowledge. But humans had something different: instinct, courage, and a flexibility that even she could not master. The next morning they set out again. The path was even more dangerous: steep cliffs, swinging vines, and predators moving silently through the mist. Jace led carefully, pointing out weak points in the paths and warning her of hidden dangers. Alara began to realize how valuable his guidance was. Without him, she might have fallen into traps or been attacked by creatures she hadn't noticed. At one point, they came across a narrow canyon filled with swirling winds. The only way across was a single rope-like vine stretched between cliffs. Alara's stomach twisted. She had crossed similar paths before, but never in such dangerous conditions. "Go first," Jace said. "I'll support you." Alara shook her head. "I am the princess. I do not follow blindly." Jace raised an eyebrow. "You don't have to follow blindly. Just trust the method." She took a deep breath and stepped onto the vine. Her body trembled slightly, but she moved steadily. Jace mirrored her movements, keeping his balance and offering guidance. Halfway across, a gust of wind shook the vine violently. Alara nearly lost her footing, but Jace reached out, steadying her without touching her excessively. "See?" he said. "Humans survive because we keep calm under pressure." Alara nodded silently, feeling a new respect for him. She had faced danger countless times, but Jace's calmness and instinct gave her courage she hadn't expected. By evening, they reached a safer area, a hidden valley protected by cliffs. Small streams ran through it, and glowing plants provided light. They rested, sharing a quiet meal. Alara noticed that despite his human appearance, Jace had survived the same dangers with ease. "You are stronger than I thought," she admitted quietly. "I told you," he said with a small smile. "It's not just strength. It's thinking, adapting, and not giving up. For the first time, Elara felt a bond forming between them. Not friendship yet, but trust. She had refused human protection before, thinking she could handle everything alone. Now she realized that even the strongest sometimes needed help, and that help could come from the most unexpected places. As night fell, the valley glowed softly with bioluminescent plants. Elara stared at the stars above, thinking of her palace, her people, and the humans she had once dismissed. Perhaps she had been wrong. Perhaps humans were capable of more than she had ever imagined. Jace sat nearby, quietly repairing a small scanner he had used to detect enemy movements. He didn't speak much, but his presence was steady and reassuring. Elara watched him for a moment, realizing that his human qualities, courage, intelligence, and calm determination, were as valuable as her alien abilities. And so, in the floating forests of Lithera, two unlikely allies continued their journey. Elara, the proud alien princess, had refused human protection, yet she depended on him more with each passing hour. Danger was never far away, but together they survived, learning from each other and discovering that strength came not from power alone, but from trust, adaptability, and courage. By the time the sun rose, painting the sky with colors of violet and gold, Elara and Jace were ready to face whatever lay ahead. They had survived the first part of their journey together, and both knew that the path forward would be even more dangerous. But for the first time, Elara felt something she had not expected: hope. And hope, she realized, was stronger than pride alone. The hidden valley offered safety for the night, but Elara knew it could not last. The enemy forces were clever and relentless, and she suspected they were tracking her every move. She sat on a smooth rock near a small glowing stream, watching the reflections ripple across the water. Jace was nearby, tinkering with a small device he had fashioned to scan for distant movement. The human's calmness was contagious, though she would never admit it. "Do you ever rest, Jace?" she asked quietly, trying to break the silence. "I rest when it's safe," he replied without looking up. "Otherwise, I stay alert. You never know what's coming." Elara studied him. His eyes were clear, steady, and focused. He did not panic. He did not rush. He simply observed and adapted. It was something she had not expected from a human. She had thought them fragile, unpredictable, and limited. Now she saw that they were resourceful in ways that were often invisible at first glance. "You humans are strange," she said. "You seem weak, yet you survive everywhere." Jace paused, finally looking up. "We survive because we don't rely on one strength alone. We observe, adapt, and act. Strength, speed, or technology, they all help, but the mind is what carries us through." Elara nodded slowly, realizing he was right. She had always relied on her knowledge and advanced technology, but humans had a kind of instinct and creativity that even she could not master. The next morning, they moved deeper into the floating forests. Their path was more treacherous now, with jagged cliffs, unstable vines, and predatory creatures that watched from the shadows. Elara relied on her senses and knowledge of Lithera, while Jace relied on his human instincts and tools. Together they complemented each other perfectly. At one point they approached a narrow canyon shrouded in mist. The enemy had likely set traps here, and Elara noticed faint disturbances in the moss-covered ground. She stopped, signaling Jace. "I can handle it," she said, brushing aside his suggestion. Jace shook his head slightly. "Not this time. Let's work together. Two heads are better than one." Reluctantly, she agreed. They moved carefully, her eyes scanning for traps while Jace used his device to detect hidden pressure points and energy fields. Elara realized that his human ingenuity was as valuable as her alien knowledge. Suddenly, a section of the ground collapsed beneath them, revealing a hidden pit filled with sharp, crystalline spikes. Elara jumped back instinctively, but Jace reacted faster. He grabbed her arm and pulled her to safety, barely missing the jagged edges. "See?" he said calmly. "Humans survive by thinking fast and acting fast." Elara's heart raced, but she couldn't help feeling impressed. She had underestimated him, and all humans, far too easily. As they continued, they discovered signs of the enemy's covert operation. Strange devices, half buried in the moss, emitted faint energy signals. Elara examined them, realizing they were monitoring devices designed to track her movements and report back to the attackers. "They know where we are," she said grimly. "They are watching us closely." Jace nodded. "Then we need to stay unpredictable. Move fast, avoid patterns, and use the terrain to our advantage. I can help. Alara hesitated for a moment, then made a decision. Very well. Lead the way. They moved cautiously through the forest, using vines, rocks, and floating platforms to stay hidden. At one point, they encountered a clearing where several enemy scouts had set up a temporary camp. Alara's instinct was to attack, using her advanced weapons to eliminate the threat quickly. But Jace raised a hand. Wait, he whispered. We can observe and plan. If we strike recklessly, they will call for reinforcements. We survive better by being smart, not aggressive. Alara watched as he used simple human tools to analyze the scouts' movements, their routines, and their patrol routes. Then he devised a path that allowed them to bypass the enemy without being seen. She followed, realizing that sometimes patience and observation were more powerful than immediate action. Later, as they rested in a hidden alcove, Alara finally spoke. I underestimated humans. You are clever, resourceful, and brave in ways I did not expect. Jace smiled faintly. I told you, strength alone doesn't guarantee survival. Humans have a different kind of power, the mind and the courage to act when it matters. Alara felt a strange warmth of respect for him. For so long she had believed her independence and alien intelligence were enough. Now she realized that survival often required partnership and trust, even with a human. As night fell, they found temporary shelter in the hollow of a giant tree. The glowing leaves cast soft light over their resting place. Alara watched Jace setting up a small energy barrier, a simple human device he had adapted for Lithuran terrain. You make it look easy, she said. It's all about observation and adaptation, he replied. Humans learn from every challenge. Every mistake teaches us something new, and every danger is an opportunity to grow. Alara considered this. She had survived many dangers before, relying on her training and technology. But humans, she realized, had a resilience that was not just physical or technological, it was mental and instinctual. They could face uncertainty without panicking, think under pressure, and adapt to circumstances that seemed impossible to predict. In the quiet of the forest, Alara allowed herself a moment of reflection. She had refused human protection at first, believing it unnecessary. Now she depended on Jace, not because he was stronger or faster, but because he offered a skill that she could not match, adaptability and unwavering courage. The next morning they continued their journey. The terrain grew more challenging, with floating cliffs separated by deep chasms and dense fog that made visibility almost zero. Alara's confidence in herself remained, but her trust in Jace grew with each step. She saw how his human intuition allowed them to avoid danger, predict enemy movements, and make decisions that could save their lives. At one point, they encountered a wide canyon with a river of mist swirling below. The only way across was a series of narrow floating rocks moving slightly with the wind. Alara's first instinct was to leap across, relying on her agility. But Jay studied the rocks carefully, noting their movement and timing. Watch my steps, he said. Time your movements and move carefully. Rushing will get you hurt. Alara followed his lead, observing the pattern he had noticed. With each careful step, she began to appreciate his patience and his methodical approach. When they reached the other side safely, she felt a quiet sense of admiration for him, and for humans in general. By midday, they reached a small plateau, where a faint glimmer of alien machinery peeked from the moss and rocks. Alara examined it carefully, realizing it was a surveillance device left by the enemy. She wanted to destroy it immediately, but Jace stopped her. Wait, he said. We can use it against them. Redirect their signals and we can see where they are sending information. Alara paused, considering his suggestion. It was clever, using their enemy's own technology as a tool. She nodded slowly. Together they reprogrammed the device, turning it into a makeshift radar to track enemy movements. That's impressive, Alara admitted. I would not have thought of that, Jace shrugged. It's what humans do, we adapt. We find solutions even when the odds are against us. As the sun began to set, they set up camp in a small cave hidden behind thick foliage. Alara finally allowed herself to relax slightly, knowing that for the first time she had a partner she could rely on. Not just anyone, a human. For hours they discussed their strategy. Alara shared her knowledge of Lithuran terrain and technology, while Jace explained his human approach to problem-solving and survival. They learned from each other, combining their strengths in ways that neither could achieve alone. By the time the stars appeared in the sky, glowing softly through the mist, Alara realized something important. Humans were not fragile. They were capable, adaptable, and courageous. And more importantly, Jace was not just a protector. He was an equal partner in their journey. The night was quiet, but the bond between them had grown stronger. Alara, the proud alien princess, had refused human protection before. Now she relied on it and she respected it. Together they had survived traps, predators, and dangerous terrain. And together, they were learning that the combination of human ingenuity and alien knowledge could overcome even the greatest challenges. As she drifted into sleep, Alara thought about her palace, her people, and the dangers still ahead. She also thought about Jace, the human who had proven himself time and again. She knew the journey was far from over, but for the first time she felt confident that they could face whatever came next, together. The sun rose over Lithera, painting the floating forests with shades of gold and green. Alara and Jace had camped near the edge of a cliff, giving them a wide view of the surrounding terrain. Despite the calm appearance, danger was never far. Alara's mind was alert, scanning for any sign of enemy movement. She had survived many challenges before, but now the threats were larger, smarter, and far more organized. "We need to keep moving," Jace said, adjusting the small device he had set up to detect enemy signals. "They're tracking us, and we can't stay in one place for too long." Alara nodded. She had come to trust his instincts, even if her pride made her reluctant to admit it. "Where do you suggest we go?" she asked. "There's a canyon to the east," he replied. "The terrain is rough, but we can use it to our advantage. They'll have a harder time following us there." She studied the cliffs and valleys below. The canyon was dangerous, with narrow ledges, floating rocks, and sudden drops. But Jace's human ingenuity had saved them before. She trusted him to guide them safely. As they descended into the canyon, they noticed signs of enemy patrols, footprints in the moss, faint energy traces, and the occasional drone hovering silently in the mist. Alara's heart pounded. Even with her knowledge of the land, navigating this canyon alone would be impossible. But with Jace, she felt a renewed sense of hope. Suddenly, a sharp whistle echoed from above. Several enemy drones appeared, moving quickly toward them. Alara readied her energy dagger, prepared to fight, but Jace held up a hand. "Follow my lead," he said calmly. "We can avoid them without a fight." He guided her through a series of hidden paths and overhangs. Using small reflective surfaces and shadows, they managed to hide from the drone's sensors. At one point, a drone hovered directly above them, its scanning beam sweeping dangerously close. Jace whispered instructions, and Alara moved with precision, following his guidance perfectly. When the drones finally passed, Alara allowed herself a quiet sigh of relief. "You make it seem easy," she said, her tone a mix of admiration and frustration. "It's about observation and timing," Jace replied. "Humans survive because we notice things others overlook, and we act when it matters most." Alara's respect for him deepened. She had always valued intelligence and strength, but now she understood that survival also required quick thinking, patience, and adaptability, traits that humans had in abundance. As they moved deeper into the canyon, the terrain became even more treacherous. Narrow ledges jutted out over deep, misty chasms, and sudden gusts of wind threatened to knock them off balance. Alara's alien agility helped, but it was Jace's guidance and steady planning that kept them safe. At one point, a bridge of floating vines swayed violently in the wind. Alara froze, unsure if she could cross safely. Jace examined the bridge carefully, testing each vine with his foot. "Follow my steps exactly," he instructed. "One wrong move and the wind will carry you into the mist below." She hesitated, then began to move carefully, mimicking his movements. Halfway across, a sudden gust nearly knocked her off balance. Jace reached out instantly, steadying her without touching her too closely. She felt the strength of his presence, not just physical but mental. He remained calm under pressure, thinking quickly, and that steadiness allowed her to survive. When they reached the other side, Alara exhaled deeply. "I underestimated humans," she admitted softly. "You're not the first," Jace said with a small smile. "But you're learning." The enemy, however, was far from finished. As they navigated the canyon, they discovered a hidden enemy outpost. Drones patrolled the area, and small energy traps were scattered throughout. Alara's first instinct was to attack with her advanced weapons. She had the technology, the skill, and the power, but Jace stopped her with a hand. "Not yet," he whispered. "We can use this to our advantage. If we strike now, they'll call reinforcements. We survive better by being smart, not reckless." Elara studied the situation. He was right. Together, they observed the patrol patterns, noting the timing and movements of each drone. Jace devised a plan. They would use small reflective panels to confuse the drone's sensors and move undetected to the center of the outpost. The plan worked flawlessly. Elara was impressed not only by his strategy but by his patience and adaptability. Where she might have relied on brute force, he had relied on careful observation, timing, and human ingenuity. Later, they took a moment to rest in a hidden alcove. Elara watched Jace repairing one of his devices, adjusting it for better range and accuracy. She realized that humans had a unique way of solving problems. They used what they had, adapted quickly, and never gave up. "You humans are remarkable," she said quietly. Jace looked up, surprised. "I never thought I'd hear that from a Lytheran princess," he said with a faint grin. Elara smiled slightly, though she kept her pride intact. "You've taught me that survival is not just about power or technology. It's about thinking, adapting, and trusting your instincts, and sometimes trusting others." Jace's expression softened. "Exactly. Humans survive because we combine courage with intelligence, and sometimes we succeed because we work with someone we trust." As night fell, the canyon glowed with bioluminescent plants and flowing mist. Elara and Jace set up a small shelter protected by natural rock formations. The enemy's presence was still near, but for the moment they were safe. Elara sat quietly, thinking about the journey so far. She had refused human protection, believing it unnecessary. Now she realized that relying on Jace had been a wise decision. His human traits, adaptability, ingenuity, and courage had saved them multiple times. She had come to respect him not just as an ally, but as an equal partner. The next morning, they continued their journey through the canyon. Elara's confidence in herself remained, but her trust in Jace grew stronger with each passing challenge. They faced narrow ledges, unpredictable winds, and dangerous creatures, yet together, they overcame every obstacle. At one point, they reached a series of floating rock platforms above a deep chasm. The rocks shifted slightly with the wind, making each step dangerous. Elara's first instinct was to leap from one platform to another, relying on her alien agility. But Jace studied the rocks carefully, noting the pattern of their movement. "Follow my steps," he instructed. "Move carefully, time your jumps, and keep your balance. I'll guide you." Elara followed, moving exactly as he suggested. When a sudden gust threatened to unbalance her, Jace steadied her instantly. She felt a wave of admiration for the human's calmness under pressure. He was not just strong or skilled. He was intelligent, quick-thinking, and dependable. By midday, they reached a hidden plateau with a small stream. Elara knelt to drink while Jace examined the surroundings for enemy activity. They had survived the most dangerous part of the canyon, thanks to their combined efforts. "I underestimated humans," Elara admitted again. "You are clever, resourceful, and courageous. You have saved me more than once." Jace smiled faintly. "I told you. Humans survive because we adapt, think, and never give up. Strength is useful, but intelligence and courage carry us further." Elara nodded. She had come to see that her pride and independence, while important, were not enough. Survival required partnership, trust, and the courage to rely on others. Jace had shown her that humans could be trusted, and that sometimes the most unlikely allies were the strongest. As the sun set over the canyon, they set up camp once more. The glowing plants and soft mist created a serene atmosphere, but Elara knew danger was never far away. Yet for the first time she felt a sense of confidence. Together they could face whatever came next. Elara, the proud alien princess who had refused human protection, had learned to rely on Jace. Not blindly but wisely. And in doing so she discovered that humans were not weak or unremarkable. They were capable, adaptable, and courageous. And with that realization, she felt hope. Hope for herself, hope for her people, and hope for the partnership that could change the fate of her world. The sun rose slowly over Lythera, painting the floating continents with shades of pink and gold. Elara stood at the edge of a cliff looking down at the valley where the enemy forces had gathered. Her heart pounded, but it was no longer just fear. She felt determination, courage, and a quiet confidence that she had not known before. This time she would not face the enemy alone. Jace Harrow, the human she had once refused to accept, stood beside her, ready to lead the way. "The outpost is here," Jace said, pointing to a cluster of dark structures surrounded by patrol drones. "They've fortified it well. If we attack directly, we'll be overwhelmed. But if we use the terrain, distractions, and timing, we can turn the odds in our favor." Elara nodded. She had seen Jace's strategy work before. Careful observation, planning, and improvisation had saved them countless times. She trusted him completely. "Then we do it your way," she said. "I follow your lead." Jace gave a small smile. "Good. Stay close and remember, think, adapt, and act. That's how humans survive." They moved carefully down the cliff using vines, floating rocks, and hidden paths to stay out of sight. Elara's alien agility allowed her to navigate the treacherous terrain easily, but Jace's planning ensured that each step minimized risk. Together they were a perfect team, two very different species combining skills, courage, and intelligence to face a common enemy. As they approached the enemy outpost, Elara noticed the patrol patterns. Drones hovered in regular loops, guards walked predictable paths, and energy traps were scattered throughout the area. She could have attacked with her advanced weapons, but Jace stopped her with a subtle gesture. "Patience," he whispered. "We wait for the right moment." They hid behind a cluster of glowing trees, observing the enemy. Elara admired how Jace noticed things she would have missed. The timing of the drone's sweeps, the slight delay in the guards' movements, and the weak points in the energy barriers. His human intuition and quick thinking gave them a plan she would never have devised alone. When the moment came, Jace acted. He threw a small device that emitted a bright pulse, confusing the drones and temporarily disabling the energy traps. Elara moved silently behind him, taking down guards with precision and agility, her energy dagger flashing in the soft light. Together, they advanced through the outpost, using stealth, strategy, and coordination. Elara was amazed by Jace's ability to adapt to the situation in real time. He improvised when obstacles appeared, found alternative paths when routes were blocked, and always kept her safe. It was a demonstration of human ingenuity at its finest, resourceful, brave, and effective. They reached the center of the outpost, where the enemy commander waited. The commander, a tall alien with metallic armor and sharp eyes, sneered at Elara. "So the princess arrives, with a human. How amusing." Elara's eyes narrowed. "I am not here to amuse you. I am here to end your attack on Lithera." The commander laughed, raising a powerful energy staff. "You alone? You are foolish." Jace stepped forward. "We're not alone," he said calmly, holding a small device that began to interfere with the commander's armor and weapon systems. "You underestimate humans. That's your mistake." The battle that followed was intense. Elara used her speed and technology to neutralize energy barriers, while Jace used his devices and quick thinking to disable reinforcements. They moved in perfect coordination, anticipating each other's actions. Where Elara's alien training gave her precision and strength, Jace's human adaptability and intelligence allowed them to exploit weaknesses the enemy did not expect. At one point, the commander tried to strike Elara directly with his staff. She dodged, but the strike created a shockwave that sent her sliding toward a chasm. Jace reacted instantly, using a device to create a temporary energy bridge, allowing her to leap safely across. She landed, breathing hard, and looked at him with a mixture of gratitude and respect. "You're incredible," she said. "Humans survive by thinking fast and acting fast," he replied, "and by trusting allies when it counts." Together they pressed forward. The enemy commander tried to rally his forces, but the humans and Litherans who had been hiding in the forests began to attack from unexpected angles. Jace's strategy had not only protected them, but it had also turned the enemy's own surveillance against them. Every move Elara made was supported by human planning, every step calculated to maximize their chances of victory. Finally, they cornered the commander. Elara raised her dagger and Jace activated a device that neutralized the commander's staff. The alien fell to his knees, defeated. Elara stepped forward, her eyes steady and calm. "This ends now," she said. "Lithera will not be conquered." The commander bowed his head, acknowledging defeat. Around them, the remaining enemy forces surrendered, their morale broken by the precision, intelligence, and courage of Elara and her human ally. When the dust settled, Elara looked around at the battlefield. Her palace, her people, and her world had been saved, but she also realized something else. She had learned a valuable lesson about humans. Jace approached her, his uniform dusty and scratched from the battle. "You did well," he said simply. Elara studied him, her eyes softening. "No, we did well. Together. I could not have done this alone. You have shown me the strength, courage, and ingenuity of humans. I misjudged your kind." Jace smiled faintly. "Humans are adaptable. We survive. And sometimes we succeed because we work with someone we trust." Elara nodded. For the first time, she openly acknowledged the truth. Humans were capable, resourceful, and courageous. And Jace, in particular, had proven himself more than worthy of her trust and respect. When they returned to her palace, the Lytheran Council waited anxiously. Elara addressed them, her voice steady and proud. "The enemy has been defeated. Our world is safe, and I have learned that strength comes in many forms, not just in power or technology, but in intelligence, courage, and cooperation. Humans, particularly Captain Jace Harrow, have shown us the value of these traits. Let us remember that alliances can make us stronger than we ever imagined." The council members nodded, impressed not only by the victory but by her wisdom in recognizing the importance of collaboration. Later, as the sun set over Lythera, Elara and Jace stood together on the palace balcony. The floating continents glowed in the evening light, the mist shimmering like diamonds below. Elara turned to Jace. "I refused human protection," she said softly, "and yet I have come to rely on it. I see now that pride alone is not enough. Trust, courage, and intelligence are just as important. You have saved more than my life. You have taught me a lesson I will never forget." Jace looked at her, a small smile on his face. "I told you humans are resourceful, and I've learned from you as well. Lytherans are intelligent, skilled, and brave. Together we're unstoppable." For a moment they simply stood in silence, looking at the glowing forests and floating cliffs. The journey had been long, dangerous, and full of challenges, but they had survived. Together, Elara felt a deep sense of respect and gratitude. She had once believed that humans were weak, limited, and unworthy of trust. Now she knew the truth. Humans were courageous, clever, and adaptable. And some humans, like Jace Harrow, were truly extraordinary. The stars appeared one by one in the sky, twinkling above the floating continents. Elara realized that this was more than a personal victory. It was a symbol of what could be achieved when species work together. Humans and Lytherans, allies united by courage, intelligence, and trust, could overcome even the greatest challenges. As night settled over Lythera, Elara spoke quietly, almost to herself. "Strength is not enough. Wisdom, trust, and courage define the strongest of all. And humans have shown me that in ways I could never have imagined." Jace stood beside her, his presence steady and reassuring. "And together," he said, "we can face whatever comes next." Elara smiled. She had refused human protection once, but now she understood its true value. Not just protection, but partnership. Not just strength, but courage, intelligence, and adaptability. She had learned that true power came from combining skills, trusting allies, and never underestimating anyone, especially humans. And with that understanding, Elara felt hope, strength, and a sense of unity that went beyond any technology or weapon. Lythera was safe. Humans and Lytherans had proven the power of cooperation, and the future was brighter than she had ever imagined. Together, they had faced impossible odds, overcome incredible danger, and discovered the true meaning of strength. And for Elara, the proud alien princess, the lesson was clear. Humans were not to be underestimated, and sometimes, the most unlikely alliances were the strongest of all. The adventure had ended, but the bond between Elara and Jace and between their peoples would last far beyond the battle. They had survived, learned, and triumphed together, proving that courage, intelligence, and trust could overcome even the greatest challenges. Lythera shone in the night, safe, peaceful, and full of promise. And at its heart stood a princess who had once refused human protection, but had come to understand its true power.